Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you, Kirsten. My name's Karen Tedder-Ward. I work for Community Voluntary Services Tendring, and we are a charity based in Clacton, but we have also some offices in Harwich, and we run lots of activities across the district. And our mission is leading and supporting voluntary action and empowering local people. So we provide services for the voluntary sector, but we also provide services for local people. Okay. And can I just ask, just quickly, can I just have a quick show of hands of who's from the voluntary and community sector, please? And from the business sector? Okay, just to give us a bit of an idea of who we've got. That's great, thank you. So, let me make sure I've got this right. Thank you. What does CVST do? Our core functions are to support, promote, represent and develop the community and voluntary sector, and we also encourage liaison. So we represent the sector through providing an overview of the needs of local people and the sector and giving a neutral and objective viewpoint. And we support voluntary sector representatives to have their say. So we'll act as a strategic partner at the meetings and make sure that the voluntary sector is represented and their voice is heard. And hopefully that will help to influence policy and strategy. So that's pretty much what we do. As I say, we also do provide services for local people, and we have a couple of teams that work at CVST Tendring. We have a healthier, independent, longer lives team who work directly with local residents and provide services and activities to enable them to reduce their isolation and to increase their social experiences. And we also have our social prescribers who are based in the doctor's surgeries across the district, and they also look at supporting patients, but not medically, in a social way. Okay, so they look at their social needs rather than their medical needs. So what I'm going to do today is give you some top 10 tips for filling in application forms, hopefully. Starting off with the very first one, which is really the most important. When you get an application form, you do need to read the criteria. You need to check the priorities, the date and the conditions. Now, what you need to be considering is, do you meet that criteria? Do you have a project or an idea that is going to meet that criteria? It is much better if you do, because if you try to sort of look at the criteria and think, oh, maybe we could do this, it might not work. So look at what you're doing, what you're intending to do. Does it meet that criteria? If it doesn't, that may not be the fund for you. Again, the other things you need to consider, do you have time to submit it before the closing date? Again, very important. Some funds may actually close before the closing date due to an influx of applications. So be aware of that. It's easy to think, oh, I'll leave that till next week because maybe, the closing date isn't till next week. But actually that fund could actually close, and it will normally say it in the guidance, but do check that, because if it's going to close and you're just hanging on, then you could actually miss it. And the conditions on there. Are there any specific conditions that you need to meet, and can you meet them? Because if you're not going to be able to meet the conditions, then again, it may not be the fund for you, or it may not just be the right time for you to apply for that funding. So the second point is ensuring your organisation is eligible to apply. Again, the information will be in the criteria document, but also what you need to do for yourselves is look at what is out there in the public domain about your organisation. So for instance, if you're a registered charity, are your charity reporting documents up to date? Have you submitted your final accounts? If you look on your documents on the Charity Commission, does it say they're overdue? Because if it says they're overdue and you're looking at it, it's more likely that the funder will probably look at that as well. They're looking to see that you're an organisation that's compliant and they're looking to see that you're an organisation that's well run. So if your documents are overdue on the Charity Commission's website, then get them updated, get them done, put them in, and then there's not that barrier. And again, that would go the same with businesses for Company House, and the same thing. Make sure you're all up to date. As I say, funders will look at that compliance. So answering all points asked on the application form. So the what, when, why, where, how. Make sure that your summary of the project includes all of those points. And if asked or if indicated, put the finance points in there as well. Okay, so if it's asking you for detailed finance, you can put what the actual point is and the amount that that's going to cost. An overall cost, let's say £1,000 for a project, a funder will probably want a little bit more detail. Well, what's the, how much are you going to spend on entertainment? How much are you going to spend on hiring rooms? How much will you spend on your staff costs or your, travel costs? If you can list all of that, that's great. Now, there may be a finance section on the application form, or that may just be asked in one particular question. So just be aware, read the question, reread the question, make sure you're answering the points that they're wanting to get through. Keeping your answers clear and concise. Again, a lot of people say to me, well, what's the, what should I be saying? What's the key things that I should be saying? And I always say, actually, I don't think there's any magic buzzwords. If you read the criteria document and there's something there that says, we want you to support organisations, we want you to support people that have health needs, then that's your buzzwords. We will support people with health needs by doing X, Y, and Z. Okay, so that's what you need to be answering there. Keep it clear, keep it concise. Try not to use acronyms. If you do need to use acronyms, at least for the first time that you use them, explain what that means and then carry on with them throughout the document. And the next point, when given the opportunity to explain about your organisation, answer that as if they don't know who you are. Because probably a few people on the panel won't know who you are. And so you need to get that point across. You need to make sure that they understand fully what you are and what you do. I've explained to you earlier what CVS Tendring does. That some of what I said, probably some of you would have thought, oh, I've never even heard of CVS Tendring and didn't know what we do. And that's quite clear. Most people, if they haven't used a business or they haven't used a charity for whatever reason, then they won't know what you do. So just make sure that you get those points across. Just some of the things that came up in something else, just to give you a bit of an idea about applicants and, when you need to be very specific. If it says that a particular applicant is excluded, then don't make the application. It's not the one for you. One of the ones recently said that applicants that were excluded would be national retailers, banks, chains, and national charities. So if you fall into that category, don't even think about picking up the application form or filling it in, because you're not going to get anywhere with it. As soon as you're just sort of setting yourself up to fail, you'd be better off looking for a fund that will fund you. Okay. Outcomes. These are the difference that will be made. So an outcome will be something that is maybe increased or reduced. So an outcome may be an increase in confidence, an increase in skills, or an increase in access to services, or a reduced social isolation for an individual, or a reduced loneliness. So again, have a look at the need and the criteria of the fund and see what they're looking for. It will tell you in the criteria what they're looking to reduce or increase, and that's what you need to put into your application when you are asked what is an outcome. What outcomes are you going to have from your project? Providing when requested key milestones and timeline, again, if they're asking for that, there's a reason. They want to see how you project plan. So you may just want to put down a list of bullet points, but if you can put a time scale or a month or a year, so for example, April, recruit some new volunteers. June to May, induct those volunteers. Finalise the project plan. May, start to promote the project. June, start to deliver the project. If you can get all that information in, it shows that you've thought about what you're doing. It's not something you've just quickly gathered together and popped on an application form. You've got a plan. You know where you're going with it. You're organised, you're methodical, and this is what you're going to do. And the other thing is as well, bear in mind when you're doing that this application may take several months to get through. So if you're applying in March, you don't want to really start your timeline in April, because you're probably not going to hear until June, at least June, maybe, about the funding success. So bear that in mind as well. Check and recheck your budget. Please do. Again, it's another way of a funder checking that you're understanding and you're putting everything in as you should do. Check your budget. We all make mistakes, we know that, but just keep checking it. Just make sure. Sometimes our budget changes as we're developing a project, but just make sure you've updated it and what on the form that you've got on the form actually adds up. Quite often there's just a little mistake made. Proofread the application before submitting. I always advise people to ask somebody outside of the organisation to proofread it. You could give it to your next door neighbour and say, have a read of that, see what you think. However you want to do it. You might want to do it to a colleague that is not involved in the project that you're looking at applying for funding for. But if you give it to somebody that knows nothing about what you're going to do, actually what they'll do is they'll go, oh, well, you've said you're going to do that, but I didn't quite understand how you were going to do it. And then they'll pick up those little points, and hopefully that will just give you the opportunity to go back, just tidy it up a little bit if you need to, and then submit it to the funder. And my last tip is about providing supporting documents when requested. There will always be, at the end of the application form or within the criteria document, there will be a list of, you will need to submit, for instance, a detailed plan, a risk assessment, and licenses was on one of the recent application forms. If that's what they're asking for, then that's what they want. So please do submit it. Submit your supporting documents, as in your governing document. If they're asking for your governing document, they may ask for your accounts, your latest set of accounts. If there is an issue about that, let's just say you're coming to the end of the year and you know that your latest accounts are going to be available in 2 weeks' time, submit the latest ones that you've got, but state we would be able to provide an updated accounts for you as soon as they're finalised. But do please do that. And you could also, if you are a new organisation, submit a projected budget. Quite often the funder, it will say it in the criteria anyway, but a projected budget will give, again, it gives that security to the funder that you know what you're doing, you've thought about what you're doing, and that you're going forward. The other thing is that, just one more thing about supporting documents, is that there is a temptation to think, oh, I've got all this stuff and I'm going to shove it all in with the application anyway because it's not going to hurt. I think what you need to just bear in mind is that that's great if you've got it. You need to bear in mind that it may never be read, because when a panel look at a funding application, they have a lot of funding applications to look at. So all the supporting document that you put in, they may not be able to read. So just bear that in mind. What you need to do is make sure all the information about the project is on the application form and in the supporting documents that have been requested. And anything that you additionally put in, you just need to think they might or might not look at that. So that's top 10 tips. I just on the slide, just on some funding resources, there's just a few things there, places where you can go for funding, particularly for the voluntary sector. There is a couple of Essex Community Foundation. They work across Essex. They manage. I'm not quite sure how many funds they manage at the moment, but at the last time I sort of spoke to them, I think it was about 160 funds across Essex. So they do manage a lot of funds, and there are different criteria for them. It's quite simple actually, because they use the one application process. You normally do a pre-assessment application, which is very quick. It's just about your organisation, and then they'll send you an application form if you're eligible to apply. So yeah, that's a good one for the voluntary and community sector. There are some others there. These slides are going to be passed out. They're going to be available, aren't they, the slides? So don't worry about writing them. If you don't need to write them down, the slides will be available afterwards. And that is my presentation, really. There are my contact details. As I say, Sector Sustainability Officer. My role is to support voluntary organisations and local charities to develop and to look at funding opportunities and ensure that they're networking, so on. So if you have any, and if you want to contact me, the contact details are there. Pretty much me. We're taking questions later, aren't we? Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'll pass on to Graham. Magic stick, pass over.
Thank you very much, and a useful overview there in terms of what we need to be looking at in terms of grants. So what I'm going to focus on is we're going to focus on grants because that's a key part of the discussion today, but also going to look a little bit wider in terms of the other funding routes that should be considered both for businesses and for those in the voluntary sector. Interestingly, with a show of hands there, we're not far off about 50-50 in terms of businesses that were in the private the voluntary sector to those that are private companies or trading companies. So in terms of grants, just extending what Karen's been talking about there in terms of the golden rules. There will be a bit of repetition here, but hopefully the repetition there is good just to reinforce some of the issues. So as Karen said there, make sure it fits your plan, the grant scheme fits your planned expenditure and vice versa. Trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole isn't going to help in terms of getting an agreement from a grant provider. Importantly, with grants, most grant schemes, and certainly most that are aimed towards the business sector, will be match funded. So a grant in itself will provide part of the solution. It doesn't provide the whole solution in most cases for your planned expenditure. So we need to ensure we've got the balance of any funding available to ensure that the project can be completed. Grants are typically not repayable. I put typically there actually. There's very few exceptions where grants may be reclaimed, and that would be where the planned expenditure wasn't what the money was eventually spent on. So there was an element of fraud in there. They will be few and far between, and I'm sure won't apply in this room, but they're not repayable from that point of view. So importantly, ensure that the grant monies are needed for your project. It's not beneficial to apply for a grant just for the sake of applying for the grant to get the free money. It's just, I think, as Karen said a couple of times, actually, there may be another scheme that fits your planned expenditure further down the line that will be better to apply for. And most importantly, with certainly commercial related grants, actually, is always ensure the grant is approved before you commit to the planned expenditure. Grants won't be retrospectively funded. The view being that if you've been able to purchase it, you didn't need the grant. So, but that's very important. And unfortunately, I've seen too often situations where the commitment is made, and the level of commitment is important here. Actually, that it's actually signing a contract without actually making a purchase could well dictate that you've actually committed to the project. So, very important to make sure we've got the funding in place and the grant approved before you formally commit to any expenditure. In terms of the process, the process for an applicant is firstly identification. Look to make sure that, and identify the grants that are available. there's a lot of legwork in this actually, and a lot of ploughing around on the internet now, which hopefully makes things a little bit easier, potentially makes things more confusing because of the amount of information that's available. But it's identifying what grants are available for your business, for your venture, and for the project that you're looking at, and then evaluating the grant scheme parameters as to how they fit with your planned project and planned expenditure. Preparation is key on this, and it's the pulling together of all of the information that's relevant to your project, to the venture, to the expenditure. Application, Karen's been through that in some detail. So in terms of the process, then we get the approval, and then just reinforcing, then we commit to the spend rather than preempting with an earlier commitment to the expenditure. In terms of grant providers, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a number of providers that are out there where we can look for grants. The government do provide grants. The government have grant schemes available, typically through the Innovate UK grant schemes. The clue's a little bit in the title there, actually. They're aimed more at innovation development ideas, and they tend to be quite large grants that are available, but they will be available to the likes of big pharma companies. They will be available to companies that are involved in green energy, net carbon zero projects, but they will typically be larger. Doesn't mean there aren't grants available, and it's a question of looking on there. The way that the Innovate grants typically work now is that they will highlight sectors that they are interested in supporting. It could be healthcare, it could be leisure, retail, and they will highlight a sector, and they will run the projects, the grant schemes in phases. And as Karen mentioned, the grants are available either on a time basis or on a fund basis. Whichever gets exhausted first dictates how long the grants are available for. But if all of the monies aren't expended in the first phase of a grant offering, they'll be reinvested in further grant offerings. So if you look on the Innovate web pages now, you may see phase 3, phase 4 grants that are available for certain sectors. You can search by keyword on there, so it's a question of playing with the keywords, looking at your project, looking at your business, and putting in their details about you that will hopefully identify grants that could be available now or available within the reasonably short period of time. UK Research and Development, extension of that, they typically provide smaller value grants through UKRI, but again, focused on research and innovation-based projects, but not exhaustively. And I think the key then is to look back and say, well, does my project fit a research or innovation profile? Local authority grants, and Kirsten's going to come on to that a little bit later. National Lottery, good place to start looking, particularly for looking at community-based funded projects, basis on which the lottery was established, or one of the reasons why the lottery was established. So there is funding available through the lottery. One of the other areas to look at, and this is perhaps more so, well, particularly on businesses, but also very much on community-based projects, is companies, large companies, where the companies have a corporate social responsibility or have a fund that they create, a war chest that's available for projects. One of the sectors that particularly is involved in this is the waste sector. So BIFA, I put on there the BIFA award there. BIFA and other waste management companies, because they run landfills, so they took over green space and they use that landfill space. One of the balances to their occupying that space is that they reinvest in the local community. So they run an award scheme whereby they grant money to businesses that are in the locality of the waste area, but the funding is available to help community-based projects. So look at the companies that are operating within the sector you're in to see if any of them have any corporate social responsibility basis. You may have to delve a bit on some of their websites because it can be quite well hidden in their websites, but they do have funds available. Some of the larger banks have funds available that they will help, particularly community-based projects. And then the other is the philanthropic bodies like the Essex Community Foundation, which is supported by larger businesses locally, typically larger businesses and wealthy families who gift money into the Essex Community Foundation for it to be granted out to local projects. So there's not an exhaustive list, but just in terms of that, I think the answer to my suggestion would be don't stop looking, just keep looking and think of any variable that could potentially provide an opportunity for you to either talk to somebody or throw up some available funding. In terms of the information we provide, this is, again, probably non-exhaustive list because each grant scheme will have its own parameters. But one of the key focuses will be the financial viability of the underlying business, the venture. What grant providers don't like to do is to give money to a business or a venture that falls over within 3, 6, 12 months. It's really about sustainability within the project. So what they're looking for there will be some form of evidence of the financial performance of the operation, whether it's annual accounts that have been filed at Companies House, if it's a limited company, if you're self-employed, HMRC tax returns, typically 2 years, so the last 2 years evidence, so that there's some view that if it's available, doesn't preclude you if you're a newer business or if it's a new venture, but ideally this is the information that will be sought. Or VAT returns that will prove that level of trade and that level of activity. Up-to-date financial information, because historical financial information is out of date, it's how is the business trading now? Last year was very good. How are you and how is the project continuing to trade? So it's what evidence you can provide by way of management accounts, so how you manage the financial parameters of your business. In whatever form it is, no one's looking for anyone to go out and create a sage set of accounts just for the purpose of it. It's what you use to manage your business. In some businesses, that could well just be bank statements because that shows your income and your expenditure. So bank statements are evidence of some form of management control of the business. So we're looking there, and ideally up to 6 months bank statements for any. I put their business accounts, but it will relate to the voluntary sector as well. So the trading operation of the business. So what also important is that we're not in difficulty. That we're not the grant provider's not just plugging a hole that's ever increasing and the money is going to disappear. So evidence that there is no financial uncertainty behind the business venture, any judgments or any pressure from any money that's owed, or any concern that there will be pressure. And then the final point there was any relevant information to the request. Karen's absolutely right. Overfilling an application with pith in terms of, well, this looks really good, I've got a lot more information, doesn't help because someone's got to sit there and read it. And as we all do, we read something quickly and we get a judgment fairly quickly. And what you're then you've either made your decision, you want to reinforce it with the information that's provided. So it's information that's relevant to the request. So what grant providers are looking to see is applications that meet the profile of the grant offer. So it is picking out those keywords in the grant offer and marrying up your answers to those questions and evidencing that it fits the requirements of your project. Within the offer parameters, so back to that, it's within the amount or time available within the scheme. One of the things that I would suggest is if you're aware of the scheme, get in as quickly as possible because they are amount limited. And if all of the good projects come in early, then the funds could well get expended and you'll be asked then to apply for a future grant scheme if it's available. If we're looking at a commercial grant, typically they will be linked to capital expenditure. So buying something, whether it's laptops, equipment, something physical, rather than more of a revenue spend, funding a website or paying salaries. So what we're looking there is comparative pricing. And when a grant provider is asking for this, they may be asking for 2 or 3 examples of how much an item would cost. I'm running a small grant scheme at the moment for another area, and I'm looking at an application for a drill for a commercial company, and I need 3 prices there for the drill to make sure. What I'm looking there is to ensure that the drill that they buy is at the right sort of price, but more importantly, that they've not agreed with their mate that it's going to be 3.5 grand, and it's not. It's 1,500 quid from Amazon or 1,500 quid from B&Q, and they pocket the other £2,000 between them. So comparative pricing to ensure that you have explored it and it is a genuine purchase. Doesn't mean you have to buy from one of those companies that you provide the example of, but we've got to feel that it's the right price. And more importantly, I think most importantly, the tangible benefit of the grant. What is the grant going to deliver for your business and for your project that if you didn't have the grant wouldn't happen? And that comes back to the point that Karen was making there actually, is what does it achieve? So does it help you create jobs? Does it help you to increase your turnover? does it help you to deliver something that wouldn't be deliverable otherwise? I've put in here something about research and development tax credits. It's particularly relevant to businesses. Something to consider, and it's one of these schemes that's available through the government, and it's available where businesses are investing in the research and development for future projects. Because you're expending money, you're not going to generating any value back for that expenditure at this time, so it's possible to achieve a tax credit against your expenses. It's typically going to apply to larger businesses. It's typically going to be for businesses that are continually involved in investing. But one of the reasons for including it is that it's not only grants directly where money is given to you, it's whether there are other ways of achieving a tax reduction to your annual expenses. So one of the areas to discuss with your accountants is there any way of me reducing my profit that hopefully I'm going to report to reduce the amount of tax that I pay, because I have spent money trying to develop my business for the future. I say it particularly applies to our business attendees rather than to the voluntary sector. Busy slide, this one, but what I wanted to just cover off also is that the funding options that are available to us, and this may be easier for you to see when you get the slides through. There's a lot of funding that is available, or funding options rather, available to businesses and to business to ventures. And working through, we've got two fairly distinct areas within this actually. You've got three colours there actually. So the first is the bit you're all familiar with, which is your own money. If you start a business, you know you've got to put cash in, you know you've got to fund it somehow before you generate any money. And it's affectionately referred to as the friends, family and fools money, because you are going to rely on people to support you. But as we work through there, you've got your working capital and your capital expenditure finance. So we're looking there at areas such as overdrafts, loans from the banks, which will be in the more straightforward end of raising finance, provided we've got a good relationship with our bank and the project is supportable. Through the other areas of funding, I won't go through them in detail because I appreciate we're fairly time constrained actually, but there's a fairly detailed, a lengthy list of what funding is available. Also to businesses where we're looking at, if we've got invoices, we may be able to raise finance against those invoices. If we're looking at buying equipment, using asset finance, so the likes of vehicle asset finance, particularly where you raise money to purchase a vehicle and you pay over a period of time. So more of a traditional loan type finance. One of the areas that's relevant to younger businesses and would be to our business attendees here actually is the startup loan company loans. Startup loan company is a government supported loan scheme. So with the startup loans, the business is trading for less than 3 years. If you've applied previously for a startup loan, you can reapply up to the maximum amount within 5 years. But that's a £25,000 government supported loan facility available to businesses trading in the UK. The benefits of it are that the loan is a private loan to the individual director or principal behind the business, and up to 4 per business can be obtained, so up to £100,000 to support businesses. The interest rate is keen in relation to certainly where we are with the current marketplace, which is interest rates of around 6% or at 6%, whereas if we're looking at a similar loan from a lender, you're probably looking at double-digit 10+% interest rates for fledgling businesses. The benefit to the business and to the business owner is that the lender is guaranteed by the government. You remain primarily liable as the borrower, but the lender has the support of the government guarantee. So it's there to help businesses that are maybe in a restricted position as far as available collateral for loans, to access finance that will help the business grow, and very much aimed at that startup end of the market. So businesses that have been trading for less than 3 years. And then as we move further through the funding spectrum, we move into the world of equity finance, and starting with the business angel world, which is the easiest comparison would be to look at the Dragon's Dens of this world. So the Dragon Den type scenario, where we're looking at private investors investing in businesses and in business ideas to enable them to grow. And the other area there would be, which is relevant particularly to smaller businesses, is the crowdfunding market. So if you come across crowdfunding works where an application is made to the public to subscribe and invest money into a business idea. One of the biggest successes of the crowdfunding market was the Brewdog pub chain, or Brewdog Brewery as it started. Brewdog started initially by offering, in exchange for monies invested, they offered beer, they offered reduction in prices on beer, so there was an incentive. So the dividend came in the form of beer. As that's moved on, now they're into pubs and hotels. So as a Brewdog subscriber, as a Brewdog crowdfunder, you get access to a cheaper purchases within their pubs and within their hotels. So you get a discount card. So the incentive, the dividend is to support businesses that you particularly favour. Crowdfunding is an interesting market. It's a big market now, and it's where we all collectively could invest in business ideas, but you can also attract investment from individuals to help a business idea develop. At the far end of that spectrum there, we're looking at the venture capital market, which would typically be larger businesses where you will see larger corporate investment into companies to enable them to grow. The most important part of your funding structure within the business, though, is the money that you generate. It's the sales that you generate. As a commercial business, it's the sales. It's getting paid for what you are delivering. And managing your cash flow from that point of view is obviously going to be a key part of that, is making sure you're paid before you pay out the money that you owe to your creditors, obviously within the time frames, because we don't want pressure from your creditors. So what I just wanted to cover off as well is the approach that funders look for. And this is a broadly similar approach, whether it's for grant funders, whether it's loan funders, or any external stakeholder to a business. And it, in a way, reinforces the application process. So there's a mnemonic there, which is Campari. And what a funder's looking for, what the external stakeholder's looking for, is to understand and be satisfied with the character of the individuals behind the business. So can you do what you do? Are you sufficiently reputable? Am I confident that you have the ability to deliver on the project that you have presented to them? There's no issues over personal character. One of the challenges potentially could well be personal financial circumstances, where for whatever reason there may be irregularities in personal financial circumstances. It doesn't necessarily mean because there's a poor credit history that you're not going to be able to access finance. It's another hurdle to go through, and it's another explanation required by a funder, by a lender, or by the grant provider. So second part of that then is the ability to deliver. If I give a grant, if I provide the funding to a venture, is it going to be delivered? Is there evidence from the past that there's experience that will enable you to deliver on whatever the project that's being asked? So very important there is actually proving your history. You know, I do this because I've got this experience, because I've got that. I guess one of the simplest analogies would be for a lender to look at is if you're a property developer. If you're a property developer and you've never developed a property before, am I going to trust you as much as somebody who has developed 10, 15 properties previously? They know the pitfalls, they know what challenges they're potentially going to face, and they've dealt with them previously. So my level of confidence in their ability is going to increase. So it's evidencing your ability to be able to do what you are saying you're going to do, what your project is. So the means there, we're reinforcing there the stability of the business. And as far as the grants, as far as the primary part of the means is if it's a matched funded grant, have you got the balance of the funding? Grants are an odd one if you're looking at the commercial grants in a way, because they are match funded. So you'll receive part of the grant, whether it's 25, 30, 40% of the overall expenditure. But in the majority of cases, you're required to make the purchase and then reclaim the grant. So in a bizarre way that you need the money to be able to make the purchase, you've got to have the money to be able to make the purchase and then claim the grant back. Usually only a window of 3 to 5 days. But it is a challenge, because to my mind, it's an oddity, because we're then looking and saying, well, if you've got the money to be able to make the purchase, you don't need the grant. But obviously, the important thing is that you've committed that money elsewhere. So one of the areas, if it is a commercial grant and you are restricted, is as far as your matched funding element of it, don't be concerned about that. I would be confident in having a conversation with your bank lender, in saying to them, I've got a grant, it's committed, I need you to bridge me for 5 days, 7 days, whatever's required, because this money's coming in. Here's the evidence that the money's coming in. I would expect most banks to be supportive of that position, because they know the money's coming and they know the source of the money. But means is there to evidence that you are a viable business, you are a viable project. So the purpose, back to what we were saying earlier in terms of this, make sure that it fits the purpose of what you're doing. There's another element of this actually to the purpose discussion, that it has to be legal. It's not supporting gambling. It's not an arms. It's not an illegal. There's no illegal purpose to the expenditure. But primarily here we're looking at matching up the expenditure to the grant scheme. So the amounts, make sure the amount for you is the right amount of money, not too much and not too little. If you're looking at a loan, you don't really want to borrow too much money, because if you borrow more money than you need to spend, you're going to pay more interest than you need to spend. But equally, you need to borrow enough to make sure that it works. Borrowing less and leaving a shortfall is always going to cause a problem. So, and the same with the grant purpose on this, actually, grant proposal on this, actually, enough to make sure we can complete it. We've got the match funding, but we've got to be able to complete it. Not relevant to the grant, but the repayment of the loan is evidencing how we're going to repay any finance that's taken on within the business. How do we prove that we can do that? That comes down to your forecasts. And it will be a cash flow forecast that says, here is my level of my income, here is my expenditure. And at the bottom, there will be a positive line, hopefully, which says, I've got enough money to be able to repay the loan, and I am going to be able to repay the loan. What lenders will typically do is they will apply a sensitivity analysis to your parameters, and they will say, what happens if you get 20% less of the sales than you were forecasting? And what happens if it costs you 20% more? And there's a point where the cash flow forecast falls over. And that point is the point where we say it's either still doable, because the likelihood of both of those circumstances hitting is unlikely, therefore happy that we can support it. And then the insurance element of it, actually part of that. So we're looking here particularly at the loan side and funding side, where there is a finance stakeholder, and is what's the credibility, and what's the credibility of the individuals borrowing, and what's my guarantee, what's my collateral if it's needed. As I mentioned, the startup loan company. So in that instance, the government provides the guarantee to the lender. I wanted to touch on a couple of areas as to how we take a step back and look at our business before you put forward a grant application. I'm sure you've all come across a SWOT analysis before, but it's a useful exercise to undertake in terms of your business, and particularly in terms of projects that you're looking to submit a grant application for. So with a SWOT analysis, there's two key elements to it. There's the internal factors, which are the strengths and weaknesses of your business, of your project, of your idea. And then there's the external factors, which are the opportunities and threats that the idea or your business presents. The argument within the SWOT analysis is that your strengths hopefully will offset your weaknesses. Your strengths, you can also demonstrate, will offset the threats within your business. But equally, the opportunity that your idea, your business delivers, will also offset the threats in the marketplace. Won't go into detail about this. I'm sure you're fully aware of it. But it's one of those exercises to take a step back with a blank sheet of paper and just look at your business idea, look at your project, and say, how does my project fit within a simple SWOT analysis? I'm going to look at another one. There's lots of management tools that you can use to analyze your business, and you can almost overanalyze your business. But this is an American economist called Michael Porter, who came up with a competitive strategy analysis. And this is a useful way of looking at your business specifically and how it fits in the market and how you differentiate yourself from your competitors. And what we're looking at here is your business relative to new entrants coming to the market. So are other people going to come in and do what I'm doing? Are other people going to come in with an idea that will mean that my idea is no longer as viable and valuable in the marketplace? But equally, are there any substitutes or alternative solutions to what I'm proposing that could make my idea, make my business, make my venture less viable? And then the either side of it is how your business and how your project fits within the marketplace. So who controls the viability of your project? Is it your suppliers? Is it your customers? And so who controls the overall potential success of your business? And in looking at it in terms of your project and in terms of your analysis, your business venture, you can then start to build your argument to why your submission for a grant or your submission for loan finance should be supported. So it's a broad brush. It's worth, if you've got a time, it's worth looking a little bit further into Michael Porter's theories on this actually, and it's how you differentiate your business from the marketplace. If you aren't able to differentiate on price, because the price is the price, do you differentiate on service? Do you differentiate in another way? Are you exceptional in the marketplace? So we're coming back to things like your unique selling point. What makes you different? Why will people come and work with you, deal with you, buy from you, and use your project? And just to very quickly finish off with a quick overview of the financial information, so particularly relevant to the business, but the same parameters and the same focus will apply to a voluntary project on this actually. So the three key documents to focus on for you in managing your financial, the financial aspects of your business are to look at the profit and loss account. And what we're looking at here is if I spend the money that I'm looking to spend, am I going to generate a profit? So we're looking at your expenses versus the income that your project is going to generate. Now, with a voluntary project and with a grant supporting a community idea, the return may not be financial. It's not cut and dry here. It's pounds versus pounds. If I spend that money, what's the value back? What are we going to deliver? The cash flow forecast there is the day-to-day, making sure we've got enough money to keep the doors open, making sure that we've enough money to pay our bills. There is a difference for a business between your profit and loss and the cash flow. So a business can make a profit but have no cash, and can have cash but not make a profit. And the difference is predominantly timing, because with a profit and loss account, you account for your sales on the day you account for them. But we're all aware that credit terms are available. You may be offering credit terms to some of your customers, so you won't get paid for 30 or 60 days. So that will create a cash flow impact. So the two are different, but of the two, the cash flow forecast is the most important, because that's actually what you've got. That's effectively going to be your bank statement. And then the balance sheet is the final part of that little jigsaw there. And the balance sheet is really the snapshot of how strong your business is. Do we have a positive balance sheet? So we've got more assets than we've got liabilities. So we're in a positive position. Doesn't mean you've got a bad business if you haven't got a positive position. It's a question of understanding the reason why we have a negative balance sheet. There are lots of big companies, massive companies with negative balance sheets that are heavily funded because they're in the development phase. So it's not the end of the world, provided you understand why it's a negative balance sheet rather than a positive balance sheet. So there's a fairly whirlwind trip through financing and a lot in there. So I'm happy at the end to answer any questions.
The grants and funding schemes that are up on the PowerPoint there, now they are all subject to lots of different things. So we are hoping that they're going to be up and running within the new financial year. But that is to say, they are subject to us receiving the money from central government, then they're being agreed by our portfolio holders, and just lots of different things. So at the end, if people do want to be notified for when these grant schemes are up and running, please take a postcard from the desk at the back, tick which ones you want to be notified about, and then we will notify you. Also, I have just been informed that the QR code does work. Our web page is down, typically. So I will be informing IT after we finish the event for them to get the web page back up and running. I don't know if they're aware if it's down or not. But if you do want to be signed up to the e-bulletin, which will give lots of information about events, grants, different things that are going on within the district, and also when these grants and schemes are up and running, please write your email address down and we will sign you up, because as I say, I know that the unfortunately the web page is down. Right, I'm just going to go through, Graham's already done this, but I just want to make it quite clear what the difference is between a capital grant and a revenue grant. A capital grant is, instance, something physical, like a laptop. A revenue grant is something that you would then put on the laptop, like a program or a website. So there is a difference between revenue grants and capital grants, okay? And there is a mix up there, but I will say which they are as I come to them. So to start off with, the sports and leisure grants. These are revenue grants. We are hoping to make these available within the new year, and they will be open to applicants managing sports and leisure activities within the tendering districts, towns and villages. We are hoping that there will be a minimum of £200 you can apply for, up to £1,000. The sports and leisure grants, they were available through the Shared Prosperity Fund for year 1 and year 2. As I say, we're hoping that again they will be available for year 3, which starts in April. The next grant, which is the Shopfront Improvement Grant, no, sorry, I will go, what's on the screen, I will go to the events grants. Again, this is hopefully be funded through the Shared Prosperity grants. They are a revenue grant. They will be open for businesses within tendering and residents. They are to put on free to attend events for the tendering towns and villages. And there is a maximum you can apply for, which is £1,000 per organisation for that grant. Back to the Shopfront Improvement Grants. Now, these are capital grants. It's a grant scheme, again, which will be hopefully made available via the Shared Prosperity Fund, and they are for tendering businesses across our town centres to regenerate their shop fronts. Hopefully the amounts will be between £100 to £5,000. We are hoping that there'll be no match funding for these. Right, the next one, which is the town centre the town centres, the visitor economy, creative and culture and heritage. Now, these are slightly different to the other grants that I've just mentioned, because these will be going out as open calls to people. Basically, what we mean by that, we put out the criteria that it's got to meet. You come back to us with your ideas and tell us how you're going to meet those outputs and outcomes that we then have to justify to central government. So we're hoping that there's going to be a creative and culture one, a town centre one. So there's hopefully be money available for you to tell us how you are going to meet the criteria that we have to meet. That is also the same with the people and skills. That will be an open call for, we will tell you what we need to be met. You tell us how your ideas are going to meet that criteria. Again, that will be funded through the Shared Prosperity Fund. And again, that is a revenue fund. Now, come on to the last two. I've been a bit naughty there and used an acronym, which I shouldn't have done. REPF is the Rural England Prosperity Fund. Now, there's two different streams to this. There is a business one and a community one. I will start with the business one. Now, Rural England Prosperity Fund is only rural areas within tendering can apply for that. That's got nothing to do with tendering. It's central government that sets that criteria. And if it's the same criteria as it was this year, basically it's Clacton and Holland that can't apply for those two grants. As I say, there's nothing to do with us. There is a magic map that central government issue. You go on that map and see if you do qualify. And as far as we can make out, it's Clacton, Holland that don't qualify for that because they're not classed as rural areas. Now, both of these are capital funding. The business one, there is a minimum of £5,000 that people can apply for, up to a maximum of £20,000. There is a 25% match funding needed for the business element of this grant, and it is a capital grant, so it's physical things that you need to apply for. If it is an event you wanted to take place, apply for the events grant. If there is something you want to do within your business that will help grow your business and it's a capital element, this may be something that you could apply for. Now, with the community element of the Rural England Prosperity Fund, it is again a capital grant, and it is the same area as in the business grant. There is no match funded needed for the community grant. The minimum you can apply for is £1,000, and the maximum you can apply for is £20,000 for the community grant. Now, as I say, we're hoping to launch these. They are subject to change because central government issue the money to us when the returns are sent in for the funding that we've just had. And also some of them need to still be agreed by our senior management and our portfolio holders and the cabinet. But at the end of the day, if the money we are given by central government for the Shared Prosperity Fund and for the Rural England Fund, it needs to be spent by the 31st of March 2025. If we as a council do not spend that money, we have to give it back. I don't want to be giving it back to central government. I want it to be spent here in Tendring to make a difference to businesses and residents of Tendring. So if you do want to be informed of any of those grants for when they do become available, please take a postcard down the bottom, tick which ones you want to be informed of, and give us your email address as well. I know that's a whirlwind whistle stop, but if I break down all of them, we'll be here all day because they're very different within what they're offering. So, does anyone have any questions regarding any of the speakers? Any questions? What I am going to do, if you put your hands up, tell me the question, then I am going to repeat the question for the recording, so it can be heard for when we're recording it. So, does anyone have any questions? I'm just going to repeat that question, and I think it's probably one for Karen. The question was regarding timelines, whether how rigid they are from the actual timeline that you put on your application. So, Karen, I'm just going to pass over to you.
Okay, so obviously, I think most funders will understand that things change. I mean, things change actually before your project's even started. You might not get the funding, as say, in time to meet with the original timeline. So just keep within the parameters. I think what you need to do is, if you feel that the timeline is slipping so bad that you're not going to finish your project, or there's going to be a real problem on your project, then you need to be speaking to your funder. Speak to the funder, say this is the situation. Most of the time you're probably going to be giving monitoring reports back anyway, and you can report that on your monitoring. But do make the funder aware. It's not going to cause you a problem. It's better to make the funder aware of anything that's slipping, rather than get to the end of the first year and think, oh, no, we're never going to meet these targets. What are we going to do now? Because what you really don't want to be doing is not meeting the targets and handing the money back. So yeah, just things do change. So just have a word with the funder. Be very open about it.
Right, the question was, is there any funding available for the maintenance of church and church halls? Right, it depends what you mean by maintenance and church halls. And where the church is, the Rural England Community Fund maybe one to look at for when that does come live. It depends as well. Upgrading heating to heat source pumps, fine, but general maintenance, not one that the council is going to be offering, but upgrading for heating, yes.
Yes, there are specific funders that will fund church buildings. There's quite a few actually. And also in the past, a church building in Walton several years ago had all the windows replaced through the Awards for All programme, which is a lottery programme. So there are funders out there. You just need to have a little research. You can always meet with me, and I'll have a little look for you. I'm just sorry, there's just something I was going to say then. I do regular funding surgeries as well, so I invite funders to speak at those, so that might be an opportunity for you as well. But yeah, there is funding. There's specific funders for church buildings.
The question was, is there any way to access funding for community project that's really intended for householders? Now, I'm going to be truthful and say I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm going to look to my left and right and ask my speakers, yeah, please, because I don't know.
There are some funders that will give some funding towards that sort of activity. Again, it's about looking at the individual funders and making sure you're getting the right one. Yeah, so there is funding out there. It might not be coming through the district council streams. There is an organisation based in Colchester. I think it's called Community Energy, Colchester Community Energy. They're really, really good, and they do a lot of community projects with regards to energy saving grants, and they're able to point in the right direction. It may even be a type of energy saving loans, but there is actually an organisation that's just had solar panels fitted to their building that are actually going to do a talk for me next week at a meeting. So if you were interested in having a look at that and how they funded that, then I can get you the information for that. Okay.
The question was regarding businesses that have had a start-up, well, and communities as well, that have had a start-up grant. Is there now any more funding available? I'm going to pass you over to Graham because I can see that he's going to be able to answer.
So the European Union grants, there are some legacy grants that we are still able to, and we're still entitled to, as former members of the European Union. And that comes back to that time issue, that they were extended for a period, and we're still within that period. So there are a limited number. We're not eligible necessarily for new grants coming out of the European Union from the EU. That's a central government initiative now, so it comes from Westminster effectively from that point of view. As far as the grants to the startups, was that through the South East Business Boost? It was. Okay, so the South East Business Boost was available through the growth hubs, through the best growth hubs. The South East Business Boost grants ceased. They ended earlier. I would say earlier this year. It was earlier last year. It was beginning of March time last year, March, April time last year. That funding hasn't been replaced. That hasn't been renewed at this stage. So there aren't grants available for businesses in the way that the South East Business Boost was. So we're back then to saying, well, what grants potentially are available for you as a business that has been trading for, and you started in 2019. Okay, so it's then a question of going sort of back to basics on that. We're saying, so who else potentially could be providing those grants? Whether it's particularly given what you're doing, do you qualify through things like the Essex Community Foundation? Could you apply through them, given that you're providing that additional support outside of school hours? So it's looking at those other bodies that potentially could support you, rather than, in this instance, I think central government. There are, certainly that I'm aware of, there are no mainstream grant schemes available for that sort of expenditure from central, and we're then back to more localised. Yes, so one area to consider, and by no means an answer necessarily on this actually, would be local businesses, whether there are businesses that could support you in that expenditure, where there is an association, an accreditation from their point of view that we support you in either providing materials or in providing finance to enable you to buy the materials. So we're looking at that local community projects to say to businesses. What sort of age are you dealing with? Okay.
I'll just repeat the question. It was regarding the Rural England Community Fund, whether you have to be a registered charity or CIC to apply. No. Simple answer, no. Next lady. I'm just going to repeat the question. The question was, any tips on how to fill out funding forms when there's multiple funders in regards to this question? It's a building. I'm hoping that Karen is going to be able to answer that one.
It's a difficult one. Basically, yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, you've got some funding already, and yeah, you're probably not going to get that whole funding from one funder, so you do need to make multiple bids. I think what you're going to need to be very, very clear on your applications is what you've already got in place and where you're intending to go for the other. So if you're looking at 4 other bids of 50,000, then making sure that that's all in on the application form, that the funder is very clear about what you're doing and how you're going to do it. I think the other thing is as well is about, you will find that some funders will say, they may allocate you the money, but they won't allow you to draw it down until you've got the rest of the money. And that's quite normal, you know, and you just need to keep the funder in, you know, in contact and up to date with the project. I think with I said earlier about not having supporting information that you haven't been requested, supporting documents, but actually if you've got a plan, a project plan that you've already got in place, having that to be able to send to the funder with a detailed plan of how you're going to raise all those different funds, what you've already raised and how you're going to raise the remaining will be really, really useful. And that's what they will be probably looking for as an additional document. But it is difficult. And again, look at the funders' criteria. There might be an element of the funding. If let's just say, for instance, that your building would have a sports facility within inside it, that maybe one funder will pay solely for that sports area and another funder might look at other areas in the building. You could sort of, yeah, you should start looking at that, yeah. You just need to bear in mind that what you apply to the fund for, that's what you're going to have to deliver. So, but yeah, it is possible to do it. But I think a detailed plan of the whole project and then picking out elements of it and sending that to the funder or sending them a whole project plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, the short answer to that one. Yes, for instance, if the parish council wants to do for a sports and leisure grant, if they want to set up a table tennis club, yeah, why not? I will answer that. The first question was, do one of us provide bid writing overview services as a council? No, we don't. So I will pass that on, obviously, to one of my colleagues. The question regarding people and skills, there is no monetary on that yet, because we don't know. I don't want to give you a figure that then changes, because the figure we've got is not set in stone. So I don't want to give you that figure. And the answer to the question is, if you're an outside body wanting to provide the service for tendering residents, yes. And I'll pass you over to my colleagues here for the other part of the question, because to say no, as a council, we don't.
Okay, so bid writing services, my role at the CVS is to empower people to be able to write their own bids. So my role is very much about looking at an application form with an organisation and explaining what the role is, you know, what they're looking for and what you might sort of answer. Having said that, we are able to offer some additional services at CVS to our members, so it's possible that we could look at something. What was the type of organisation you are? Sorry. Yeah, so it's possible. I mean, I don't think you're an affiliated member of ours, are you? Have a look on our website. You'll be able to see whether you fit as a member. Okay.
We don't provide bid writing services, unfortunately. There are specialist bid writing. I say specialists. There are companies that promote bid writing applications. I'm going to be slightly cynical here in this, in that the bid, any bid that you submit, you have 99.9% of the information available for that. So you write the bid. Anyone that is involved with you will just edit and tailor and put it into maybe a different form of words, but ultimately it's your bid, your application. So I think controlling that's important from your point of view, because you do need to follow through on whatever the project is or whatever the purpose of the application is. So it is important that you control the process. And I say I'm slightly cynical because I think you do all the work anyway, and you pay someone else to do it in that instance. But that's, you know, they do exist. In terms of overview, there's obviously capacity to overview, and I think Karen mentioned this earlier, is getting more than one person to look at your application, look at the parameters of the grant scheme, look at the application. To the layman, does it answer the questions? And it's important that you write it for the layman, so the person that doesn't know anything about your business, anything about your venture, anything about the project, and explain it in as simple words as you can, that clearly demonstrate why the grant you're eligible for it and why it's right for your business. But short answer there, unfortunately, we don't provide grant bid writing services. So what is possible, and the devil is always going to be in the detail of this. So it will depend on what each grant scheme says. But it is possible in that instance, and where you do get the funding over and above what is required, that you cover part of your matched funding element through one or other of the grants. So it is possible that is the case. So I say the devil's very much in the detail on each of the grant schemes. The reality is you can only take what you need. So you've got options within that, provided the grant provider is prepared to follow those options, which is scale back on each of them until you meet the amount that you're going to spend, you need to spend rather, or select out of the ones that you've got, the ones that will get you to the figure that you need. So it's a roundabout way of saying it's your choice in a way, provided the grant provider and the grant scheme allows you to do that. So some may say very clearly, your funds, you need to demonstrate you have your cash. As a business, as a venture, you have raised this amount of money. But if you're a voluntary project and you're raising money by various grants and gifted funds, then your matched funding element, if it's required, is going to come from gifted funds anyway. So yeah, it's a great position to be in, but I think it's going to be a question of selecting which grants provide you with the best value out of that. But certainly, if you put a number on it and say, right, well, I need £20,000. If you've got £30,000 worth of grants, you're only ever going to be able to take 20,000 of it because you haven't got any reason to spend that extra 10. So it won't be gifted. What you don't want to do is get to a point where you've got too much money promised, you apply for all of it, you get it all agreed, and you can't spend the full amount that one or other of the grant providers has offered you, and you then end up short on your budget. Short on what you need to spend. So it's managing it. So it'd be a lovely position to be in. I don't necessarily think it'll happen too often.
But that is a service that CVST, is it a service that CVST offer?
We actually do. I actually organise funding surgeries, and I have funders come and speak. So funder in March, I've got the lottery come in, and also a funder which is based in Colchester, the Colchester Catalyst. They're both going to come, and they do a presentation about their funds that are available, and they normally make themselves available afterwards to network and talk to people about their projects. In the past, I've had funders come and they'll do a presentation, and then I'll set up one-to-ones with people that are looking for funding. So there are opportunities like that. As I say, so our services are for the voluntary and community sector. So yeah, I mean, have a look on our website. There are there is an affiliation page on our website, and you can have a look and see how you can become an affiliated member. There's a criteria. Just check the criteria, see if you fit it, and then make an application if you fit the criteria. But we do those anyway.
Quick outline of that project, that question. It's whether funding is available for a new project or continuing projects. With some of our funds, they're continuing projects. They don't have to be a new project. They can be for continuing funds. That's yeah, and I'm sure that that's probably the case for other funds that are available. Yes, it's lovely to have new ones, but it's also nice to have. It's also nice to keep going something that's already proving successful. You may well do, but we also have an LSEP officer, and I know that's an acronym, but I can't remember what it stands for. Laura, help. Local Cultural Educational Partnership Officer. Now, her name is Olivia. She's not here today. I think because she works within the schools. That might be, I will take your details and pass them on to her if that's okay, because if you're working within the schools, she's a lady that you do need to be in touch with. But again, with some of these, you may well qualify for the open calls, for the Creative and Culture and Heritage one. Without obviously knowing your complete project and what it involves, I don't want to say, yes, you'll definitely, qualify, but please fill out one of the forms, tick it, and then we'll make you aware, and you can then see if your project does fit that criteria. But I will take your details as well and pass them on to Jess, the Creative and Culture Manager, and Olivia, the LSEP Officer, because that sounds like a good match to me. So if anyone has any more questions, please come and see us afterwards. Finish the pastries, chat to each other, because that's the best way to learn new things is network. So thank you so much for coming. Please do fill your feedback forms out, because the only reason we know what you want is because you tell us. Thank you.